welcome. I'm hoping that the crowd is going to grow because this is far too important a topic not to have it broadcasted far and wide. We have got wonderful panelists today. First of all, Dr. Jean-Yves Le Gall, who is the president, of course, of the IAF, and also the president of CNES, the French Space Agency. We have Simonetta Di Pippo, who absolutely does not need an introduction from UNUSO. And then we have Naomi Mathers, who is with the Satellite Industries of Australia Association. And I also want to point out this is a WEA Europe event, and Simonetta is an honorary president of WEA Europe. And also sitting in the audience is Christina Papo, sorry, Christina, and she is the Director for Professional Development at ESA headquarters. So we will get started, but first I want to say that I hope that we will get some questions from the audience, and what is going to happen is volunteers will have pieces of paper and pens, and if you will just raise your hand and they will come to you, you can write your question and then the volunteer will bring it to us. The only other thing that I want to do before we start, and I think Jean-Yves is going to be very happy about this, this morning there was the Iaf Diversity Breakfast. It's a major event. Then there was a Diversity Awards ceremony today at lunch. But this morning at the breakfast, all of the audience was charged with who is going to be the first woman on the moon. Where is she going to come from? What age will she be? And when is it going to happen? Well, I am thrilled to find that before the sun goes down today, I have found the person who might be the first woman on the moon. Just as I was walking in here, I just happened to meet a young student, a female student in Canberra, and her name is Sarah Karstens, and she's in the 9th grade, and she plans to be an astronaut. Sarah, if you would please stand and just wave to people so they can give you their business cards and see you in about 10 years. Thank you for allowing me to do that. So we're going to start. I'm going to ask Dr. Le Gall to open with a few remarks of his impression of the critical topic of reducing the diversity gap in our organizations. And then we will go to Simonetta and then Naomi, both of whom I think have some charts. So Dr. Le Gall.
So thank you, Mary. And I would like just to remind a few points of what we are doing at the IAF on this issue. First of all, I would like to remind that last year at the ASC in Guadalajara, I presented the IAF Global Innovation Agenda 2016-2019, and this agenda, in fact, is based on 3 key principles. The first one is to preserve our heritage and to build on existing strengths. It could seem obvious, but I think that it is very important. The second point is to listen and to open up to the world. It is also quite important. And the third point is to prepare the future and to connect all space people. And it is more and more important at the time when we have so many social networks and so many different ways to communicate. And one of the most important elements in this agenda is to foster the principles of what we call the 3G diversity, 3G standing for geography, generation, and gender. And in fact, these are today the main pillars of diversity principle of the Federation. Geographical diversity and global reach have been traditional features of the IAF since its creation. Attracting the young generation has been the focus of the IAF during the recent years, with many, many new activities. And gender diversity is still an area where strong progress needs to be achieved, and close cooperation with organizations like Women in Aerospace, dedicated promotion of opportunities for female space actors within the Federation and the space sector in general, presenting successful role models and encouraging the young generation of the female space community is very, very important, and this is exactly what we are doing at the IAF. I think that these are the general ideas, kind of strategy, but we need to have very, very concrete cases. And I think that these goals to achieve this shall include, first, encouraging and supporting space communities in remote areas. Second, further increasing the involvement and the offer of the young generation. Third, to revive the IAF mentoring program for attracting specifically the female space community. And 5, to establish IAF focus on all diversity aspects. So, after 1 year of activity, we have been working a lot, and in particular with the support of Mary Snitch for all what is related to diversity. We have been working a lot to implement this idea, and we created an IAF 3G international platform for diversity and equality in astronautics, or in short, ID. And since the creation of this new item, we had a number of ID diversity events with Luncheon in ISC in Guadalajara, with many activities in the Global Space Congress in Abu Dhabi early this year. At the IAF Spring Meetings, we had also Diversity Day, something the same in GLEX in Beijing in June. And during this ISC, we have in fact several events. The ID Breakfast and ID Luncheon yesterday, and today, at the occasion of awarding our first IAF Excellence in 3G Diversity Award. And so this award has been given to the Mohammed Ben Rashid Space Center from Dubai, because after very, very careful evaluation of the way they are proceeding, a jury concluded that they deserve this award. And tomorrow morning, we will have a joint IAF, ID, and WEA, Women in Aerospace Europe breakfast. So you see that we will continue to work hard to attract all our members to join our effort to promote diversity and to use our ID platform to achieve concrete results. So this is what we are doing at the IAF. It's a good start. We have already quite interesting results, but we must continue, because diversity, if you are not proactive, it doesn't exist. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I hope that okay, good. So, indeed, Mary, thank you very much for your introduction. And indeed, I'm currently the director of the Office for Outer Space Affairs, but I'm one of the 2 co-founders of Women in Aerospace Europe, and currently the honorary president too. But what I would like to focus on right now is on a new project that we have been putting together recently at the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, which is called Space for Women Project. And before going very quickly to describe what this Space for Women project is or is all about, I would like to take the opportunity to mention that the role we have is really the role of facilitating international cooperation and all the connections possible among all the main players in the space arena. And therefore, through this platform, we act also as a sort of a capacity builder, helping mainly member states, developing countries in particular, and also emerging countries, to look at what space can do for improving the quality of life. And clearly diversity and gender equality linked to STEM education is one of our main activities. This is also because our member states are very supportive of new activities in terms of STEM education and women, and in particular women in developing countries. And so this brought us to the Space for Women project, considering also that as you probably are aware of, in September 2015, there was a UN summit in New York, which approved the so-called 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the relevant 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And so when we talk about STEM education, in particular for women and in particular for women in developing countries, we are addressing in a very straightforward way, on one side the SDG number 4, which is quality education, and on the other side SDG number 5, which is gender equality and empowerment of women. So you see here, I'm not going too much into the meaning of this slide, but you see that there is a strong link between STEM fields, women, and as I said, in particular, women in developing countries and the space sector. And this is also linked not only to the 2030 Agendas of Sustainable Development, but also to COP21, so the Paris Climate Change Agreement, and the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, which are the agendas we are following very strictly for all our activities. As we say, it doesn't, even if the project is built following the request from member states to deal with STEM education, and in particular for women, and in particular for women in developing countries, this approach can be applied to everyone, not only women and not only women in developing countries. And so just to enter a little bit more in the project, or the status, the current status of the project, we will have next week in New York, co-organized with UN Women, which is the entity in the United Nations system dealing with gender equality in a broader sense. This meeting will be organized in two main sections. The first 2 days is really workshop type, where we have been inviting experts from all over the world to discuss and help us in shaping the project. And the last day, instead, there will be more a high-level panel where we have really top-level representatives, including the Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, Minister of Costa Rica, for example. We have our champion for space, Scott Kelly. Sandy Magnus, by the way, is also giving a keynote speech, and some other key representatives of the various, let's say, stakeholders. This Space for Women project is really dedicated to strengthening and delivering capacity building and technical advisory activities in supporting countries to help them in developing proper projects in STEM fields. with particular attention to women. And as I said, the Space for Women project expert meeting next week will help us shape the future of this project, will help us shape the content of the project so that we can bring it at the attention of our member states, the 193 member states of the United Nations in June 2018 at the time of Unispace Plus 50. So the core goals of the project are here summarized. Let's make space work for the development of women. Let's make space in the aerospace industry and STEM fields for women. And let's make the Space for Women project together. Thank you very much.
So before we go, Naomi, to you, I have a question for Simonetta, and that is, you have talked about some very important initiatives that your organization is promoting. Can you, at this point in time, cite statistics as to how these initiatives are actually, in fact, reducing the gender gap in your organization, or are you in the process of developing those statistics?
Currently, in my organization, so in the organization I run, so the Office for Outer Space Affairs, we don't have any issue of this kind, considering also that we are under the umbrella of the United Nations, so the issue is less strong, let's say, or less evident than in other cases, even if you probably heard that very recently Mr. Guterres, the UN Secretary General, launched a gender equality initiative trying to reach 50% of women in top-level position in all the UN entities, starting from the Secretariat, but more in general. So he has a specific action across the board, the UN Secretariat. For what the Office for Outer Space Affairs is concerned, no, we don't have this issue. However, we pay a lot of attention, and we were paying a lot of attention already, just before, even before starting this project, when we organize capacity building workshops or training activities. We always try to be balanced in selecting experts from developing and emerging countries. We pay for, because very often we offer these experts from developing countries to cover the costs of their trips in order to allow them to attend our capacity building workshops, and therefore being exposed to the entire world on the various topics. So ranging from disaster management to climate change, or CubeSats, or applications from space, space-based data in infrastructure services applications, all the topics that we deal with when we do our capacity building workshops. We always try to increase the number of women. We are not 50-50 for the time being, but we are quite in a good shape. The Space for Women project is more devoted to work with the member states in order to allow young women to really approach STEM fields in the proper way, more and more, so that we have more women in these fields. But then I do believe that it's not enough, that we have to mentor them, but we have to mentor them together with the member states, because otherwise it's a little bit in the cloud, and it doesn't go in the right direction, which also means that it's not a short-term project. It's probably more a medium-term project, but it's probably what is currently needed, because on the short-term we can really do a lot in terms of dedicated and focused activities, workshop by workshop. In addition, if I may, As I said, this project has been built or is going to be built based on a precise request from our member states, which was focusing on women, but the methodology will be let's say set up and ready to go can be applied to everyone everywhere. So it's more general. Still, the first focus will be women in developing countries.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Naomi.
Thank you very much. First of all, on behalf of the SIAA, it's a pleasure to welcome you all to Australia. But in that, from that perspective, I've been asked to talk about some of the programs we have in Australia that's from a diversity point of view that support industry growth. So I'm very much going to present how we can help industry, and we can actually use that as a benefit, diversity as a benefit to support our industries. So those of you who have heard Jan Werner speak, you would be very familiar with the Space 1.0, 2.0, 3.0 construct. So we've seen the evolution of our industry. If we're going to talk about how our industry can grow and benefit, we need to understand the evolution of our industry. And as we've moved from the single endeavour of the scientist or the engineer who's looking for a major discovery, but predominantly on their own, to a collaborative effort, we see the environment we work in and the skills we need evolve over time as well. So as we move to a more commercial environment, a more international environment, and then with Space 4.0, we see a very integrated environment. So the sort of skills, the international collaboration, the very different disciplines, if we're really going to drive an innovative environment and we're going to involve citizen science and endeavours like that, a lot of the structures we have don't suit. And we really need to be very, very open and embrace different thinking, different skills and different people. So when we look at the workforce that we need to do this, if we look at diversity, it's not only our age diversity, we need new ideas, but we need the experience of our workforce who have been had much experience on these projects. We need, for the international collaboration, the cultural diversity. We need all the different genders. If you're not familiar with it, this is an acronym we use quite a lot in Australia, the LGBTIQ. Lesbian, gay, bilateral, transgender, intergender and queer. And if I've missed anybody in that, that was most definitely not the intention, because the indication is we need people from all disciplines, all backgrounds, able-bodied and disabled. If you have a gender mentality, if you have a diversity mentality, the gender seems to take care of itself. But we don't have a functioning environment if we just take two of everything. If we don't take Noah's Ark approach and just say we've got two women or we've got two people from a particular country, therefore we've achieved diversity. So this is when it gets really, really difficult. And if we think about some of the barriers to achieving effective diversity, first of all, we have to understand that there is a benefit to it. We need to be motivated to achieve this. If personally a company or an individual doesn't see a benefit to diversity, then they're not going to be motivated to support such an endeavour. And understanding that we all come with our own biases, and I have experienced just as much bias between disciplines as I have for any other metric. So understanding that we all have, we all naturally gravitate to work with people who look and sound like ourselves. So it actually takes effort to be inclusive and to extract the best out of our colleagues. And then to be very conscious of how we sometimes unconsciously discriminate through, if you're not in the space community, moving around this Congress this week would have been very, very difficult with all the acronyms and jargon that we seem to use. So being actively inclusive. And so how do you structure that? How do we structure an environment where we do get the best out of everybody and evolve into that Space 4.0? And often the workplaces of the astronomer are not the workplaces that we would experience today. So really concentrating on some concrete things, some programs that have happened in Australia. we do need to actively structure this. So we start seeing projects that have that are more interdiscipline. Here we've used constructs like industry growth centres that actually bring together the customer with the universities and the companies all working in a particular domain. In the space area, we have 2 cooperative research centres, one for space environment research and one for spatial information. And these are 2 areas that are critical to have that interdisciplinary nature. But it also means that we can train students with a focus for industry. We see that when you come outside the boundaries of our individual institutions and you actually define what the structure will be, what the metrics will be, and what the culture will be, it's a chance to try something new. So from the very, very beginning, an interdisciplinary and a diverse workforce and a diverse culture and a diverse culture can be established from the very beginning, because using the metrics and using the culture, you can establish that from the beginning. I'm very pleased to see, in some ways, the ultimate diverse environment is in Australia. The interdisciplinary and bringing together our students and our youth and everything is the space agency I can now add on the list of all of those things that can support innovation. So along with all of our accelerators and hackathons, I can now add the ultimate interdisciplinary environment, which is the Australian Space Agency. And so these are then an opportunity from the very, very beginning to say we want something that supports our economic growth, but using all of the best that diversity can offer to achieve that impact. And certainly I've spoken to a number of our young people of all genders and all backgrounds, and they're certainly very excited about helping to achieve that.
Do we have any questions from the audience on paper? If you don't quite yet, please keep thinking about this. We're only going to be wrapping up in about 10 minutes here to make way for the next. Do I see some questions? Maybe not. I'd like to just ask for your thoughts for all of you. There is the notion, and I think it's very valid, that having a very diverse workforce or centering your workforce development on ensuring diversity really has social benefits, economic benefits, and you're really opening the door for the best and brightest talent. If you aren't practicing diversity in any form, you just are not. That is not a good business practice. Can you, Jean-Yves? Can you speak to that?
I think that in fact today diversity must be applied in space business because it's a consequence of the evolution of space. We are moving from a situation when in all of the entities dealing with space, we had only space specialists, to a situation where, with the new space, all the field of applications which can be invented, we have people coming from all the fields of the human activity. And what is very surprising is that 10, 15 years ago, when you had a look in the newspapers offering jobs for space, only space engineers were requested, and today people with a lot of big diversity of experience are requested. And so I think that with this new approach of space, in particular with the application, we need to have people coming from everywhere, different culture, different experience, and so on. So in a nutshell, diversity. And in the same time, because we have such a diversity in the space entities, people imagine new ideas, new applications, and it's a kind of cross-fertilization, and it is why, in my opinion, diversity is so important, and in the same time, diversity is so rewarding because it's the future of space, to have a space which is completely open and just not limited to rocket scientists.
Thank you. Simonetta, do you have thoughts on that?
Yes. I can tell you that on one side, I've been selecting people for, my teams in the last more than 30 years, continuously, on a continuous basis, and I'm never selecting someone depending on the gender or the region of the world is coming from, or he or she is coming from. And that's the only way to be sure that we have really selecting the best talents that you can find. At the same time, I'm also against having, for example, this, having panels with, as a minimum, 40 or 40% of women, or every time we debate the number of women present in a panel discussion. I can tell you that in 2 weeks' time we will have in New York at the General Assembly a discussion on the on transparency and confidence building measures in outer space activities. It's a joint discussion between the first and the fourth committee of the General Assembly, so disarmament and peaceful uses of outer space. And by chance, all the panelists are women, but just because they have important roles, and we selected the roles and not the individuals. So in this way, if we start to look at the problem from another perspective, which is the one I always try to use also to avoid discrimination on the other side, I believe that that's the only way to really do things well, because we need merit, and we need not to link merit to gender.
Very good, Naomi.
I completely agree that excellence is the first metric. And I think... Hello? Excellence is definitely the first thing that we should be aiming for. But I think if you're aiming for excellence, that also means the diversity of ideas, and the diversity of ideas normally comes from a diverse background. So I think the other thing that happens is that having a diverse culture also encourages transparency, and transparency is then you don't get one group or other, because they're in the majority, selecting people that look and sound like them. You're getting an inclusive environment. So you're actually getting a more thoughtful solution. You're thinking about the diversity of customer requirements. You're not having engineers complain that accountants are telling them what to do. They understand the whole life cycle of a project. So all of that diversity approach, all the different Gs start coming naturally. You don't have to set targets. But sometimes you actually have to understand. I like when we aim for excellence, if a candidate has come from an environment where they've had to work very, very hard because they haven't had the opportunities, even if they are not the very best candidate, the skills that they also bring through that struggle, sometimes they bring a resilience and they bring other aspects to the team. So I think that we have to also, when we look at our selection criteria, also look further into the journey that person's gone. So if somebody's if we talk about students, if a student has gone, had all the opportunities and has achieved good marks, but somebody else has gone to a school where there's no science, and yet on their own they've learnt a lot of science, I think they should then be given an opportunity. And so I think that's the discretion that allows talented people to succeed.
Good comment. Thank you. We have some questions from the audience. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask this first question that comes from Sarah's mom, Jane Karstens. She is the mother of 3 girls who love STEM, and this question, Simonetta, is for you. Has online education resources such as the Khan Academy impacted on bringing STEM to girls in developing countries?
Not so much, in the sense that what we discover is that there are a lot of other elements which are not allowing young girls in developing countries to get access to STEM education and more in general to education. I don't have time to enter into statistics, but because it's a long story, but you would be surprised to see how many negative factors keep young girls far from any kind of education in developing countries, which are really linked to the social environment. And so in reality, that's one of the reasons why I believe strongly that any activity cannot be done on a single individual. Yes, thank you, Genevieve. It has to be done together with the local authorities. It has to be done together with the given country, and also sharing experiences and lesson learned from different countries and different social situations can help us to shape the projects, even the e-learning projects, in a proper way. And without the support also of NGOs and local entities, it's really impossible to do anything.
Thank you. This next question is from a woman who is with Boeing. I am guessing probably an engineer with Boeing. We have a legacy of multiple decades of male-centric human space systems. How do we start identifying and breaking down the unconscious barriers this has created? And this is for any of you who are willing to comment on that. Do you want to start, Naomi?
This is my personal opinion. I think cultural change is the hardest thing to address. I have some wonderful male colleagues who I know that some of the comments they make do not come from a bias at all. It's almost a natural, ingrained comment, but they don't understand the implications of some of their actions. And so the challenge sometimes is I've talked about lots of different structures. We've had different programs of presentations where it's not addressing an individual, it's just talking, sharing experiences and the implication of language or the implication of actions. Understanding that what might be offensive to one person is not offensive to another, but if it holds you back, then that has an impact on your work performance and you're entitled to express that. I was very lucky that I had a mother who empowered me to speak up. It's very difficult to do that, and I think the greater power is speaking up on behalf of somebody else. So when you see an action, and even if it's said in jest, maybe the kindest one I can think of is to ask, did you really mean to this? It sounded like you implied this, or did you really mean to be derogatory or rude or whatever? But if something is impacting work performance, we need to be able to express that, and addressing it from a company performance perspective, I think is the most positive way to do that, but it will take time. And that's not good enough in one way, but it will take time. We have a culture in our families and in our communities that also feed into our workplaces, and that is best in some ways addressed through our children. I'm absolutely thrilled to see so many of my friends where it's the father who is staying home as the caring parent for much of the first 6 months of that child's life, and some where they share that. So I think these cultural changes, the more a workplace can encourage that in a social context, the more we're likely to get cultural change at work.
Thank you, Naomi. I'm going to ask one last question, and that is from a person from Purdue University. This is for all of you, and this is sort of an action for those of us here on the stage going forward. And it's something that I related to or implied my thought on this when we first started. And someone is asking, why do you believe that there are, this says only 35, I'm thinking there may be slightly over 35 people here, and how can we change that for future plenaries? Wow. We've been here, all of us have been here all week and have sat in rooms that are fairly filled to capacity for the most part. First of all, as the moderator, I'm going to take a little license to partly answer this question and then ask my colleagues here to answer if they wish. This isn't actually a plenary, this is a global networking forum. That type of session is fairly new to the IAF, and I will say that when it started, all GNF sessions were quite sparse, and some were even canceled because there just wasn't a full body of an audience there. What I would like to see going forward, and maybe even as early as 2018, is to take this important topic of diversity and submit a paper, submit an abstract for a plenary or for a high-level lecture, and really put this topic on the map as it so well deserves to be. Just one other related comment to that: since President Legault announced the diversity initiative as a central part of his agenda in 2016 in Guadalajara, there have been very important diversity events, breakfasts, lunches, diversity events with important speakers that have been held last January in the Middle East, in Paris during regular IAF meetings in Paris in March, annual meetings. There was a diversity day that was very well attended all day long. Then in Beijing in June, there was a very well attended, very important diversity event. And now here in Adelaide, we have many events on diversity, all of which have been well attended. But to get to the meat of this and to roll up our sleeves and talk about how we can advance diversity, how we can really make it part of our business priority in all of our organizations, I think that the topic deserves a plenary session, and we might work toward that. Yes, you're the boss there.
No, but it is true that there are less people in this session than in the previous one. It is true also that this morning we had breakfast at 7 a.m., which was quite early for most of the people, and there were a lot of people. And for the lunch that we organized when the award of diversity has been given to the Mohammed Machine Space Center, it was also full. And another comment, 2 years ago, this event didn't exist because we didn't put diversity on the top of the list of what we have to do. So I've been appointed president of the IAF for 3 years. My ambition is that when I leave at 2019, diversity will be a common word in the IAF. So it means that my dream is an IAF with more young people, more ladies, and more people coming from countries which were not represented up to now. And without entering into detail, I think that we already made a part of the way. We still have a lot to do, but I am sure that in 2 years from now, we will have made much more than what we could expect.
Thank you, Jean-Yves. Simonetta, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I can only share 100% what the president of IAF just said. I also see that in the audience we have men and women, which is also good because very often this diversity related discussions are I don't know why, but mostly attended by women. One example is, for example, we have next week, as I said, this meeting, and most of the speakers and the ones who applied to be selected for becoming speakers at this important meeting in New York, most of them are women. So it gives the impression, at least probably this was not the case at the breakfast, it was not the case at the lunch or at the ceremony, but when we go into the real topic and we start discussing the topic, this is a topic which is more for women, at least that's what I see, even if, as I said here, it's not so evident, than for men. So probably we have to do something in order to engage more everyone, and so in this way we can probably overcome the problem step by step. I don't believe we can do it just in one shot.
Thank you. Naomi, do you want to make a closing remark on that?
I would like to make a couple of comments, if I can.
Okay.
The first one is that, so one of my other roles here is as IPC co-chair, which means I head up the technical program, and considering there are 20 parallel sessions and another GNF running at the same time, then this is not, we have a high level of competition. So I thank you very much for choosing us. The second one is that I'm definitely a person of action. And I say we take this audience of 35 or 40 and say if every one of you got on social media and talked about how important this topic is, it has a greater impact. So we can choose to say this is not good, or we can choose to do something with that. And in some ways, my measure of success is when we no longer have to have this session. When this is so ubiquitous that we actually don't need to have a dedicated session, then I'll know we've succeeded. If we're going to have a diversity of ideas, I'm going to say I agree with you, Mary, that I think a plenary would be excellent, but I'm also going to say I loved this new format of the Heads of Agency plenary. I love the fact that they got a theme this year to talk about science or industry. I think diversity would be a fantastic topic for the heads of agencies to discuss in that way.
I love it. That's a great idea. So just thank you, panelists, very much. In closing, I would just like to suggest, we started by saying, and you understand, this event was, this Global Networking Forum was organized by WIA Europe, Women in Aerospace Europe. There are, by the way, WIA organizations literally all over the world. I would suggest to Sarah and your sisters and others in the organization to go and find WIA Europe online, Google WIA Europe, and go to their website and see what they are talking about. If possible, Christina, if there is a sort of a mailing newsletter distribution list that even very young students can get on to understand what is going on in the world of aerospace for women, I think that would be a really great and easy first step for you to make to become more informed on the aerospace industry and what the opportunities are for women. So with that, I will again thank our panelists. Your remarks were on point very much. Thank you. And we will be adjourned. Thank you so much for being here.